Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Craig Enevoldsen, Chief of Police, here to talk about a couple different things this evening. At the end of last weekend, or end of last week's council meeting, it was pretty clear that council was curious as to what kind of reform issues are occurring now or have been occurring. So I'm going to give a little bit of update on that. Also talk about some of the racial justice issues I think that we as a police department have taken on over the years, and then lastly end with a report about some of the violence that you've seen in your TIP 411 reports. Although the sense of urgency around police reform since the incident with George Floyd, that's not new to us in law enforcement. And the reason I can say that is the issue of police accountability and police transparency and police reform became an issue for law enforcement following the death of Michael Brown, which was July of 2014. That really started that work in our profession. Then we had the incidents locally here with Jamar Clark, it was 2015. Philando Castile was 2016. Justine Damon was 2017. Now we have George Floyd in 2020. So once it went from being a national to a very local and regional issue, that really stepped up things for law enforcement even within Minnesota. So we've been doing a lot of work around this, quite honestly, for the past 6 years. In fact, the report that a lot of people hold up as the gold standard was issued in 2015. That was President Obama's 21st Century Policing Report. So even that goes back 5 years. So where we've been, going back after Michael Brown, some of the other situations, one of the first things we did is we have a software system now where we can track every single use of force incident that occurs. Each one of those use of force reports is reviewed both by the supervisor on the scene as well as the lieutenant in charge of defensive tactics as well as the inspector that oversees that division. Every single one is reviewed. We also have an early warning system in there that can flag us if one of our officers, it measures a lot of different things, but really what it does is it can alert the supervisor on duty if that officer has indicators of too much force, excessive sick time, excessive vacation, a lot of arrests based upon discretionary activities, which is one of the things they look for in officers that are not performing as they should. In 2016, with the support of the City Council, we were one of the first suburbs outside of Burnsville to put on body-worn cameras. Prior to us putting on body-worn cameras, we went out into the community and hosted 2 community sessions to get their input on our policy and the data. We made some significant changes to our policy based upon those community meetings. For those that remember, 2017 was the executive orders related to immigration. I think I stopped counting the number of meetings that I participated in well over 23, trying to assure the community that their local law enforcement was not involved in immigration enforcement. We also made several policy changes to our immigration policy as a result of those meetings as well. And you're hearing it again, lots of conversation around diversification of the police force. I will present some data here in a little bit around that. So around diversifying the police force, we had been trying unsuccessfully to recruit people of color into our police department that lived in the community. We were just doing a standard hiring process that was not bringing in the candidates that we needed. So we actually partnered, I believe it was 2016, with the University of Minnesota as part of the Resilient Communities Project, and that's what they did their project on, was they looked at our hiring standards, they looked at our culture within the police department, looked at our job postings, all those kind of things, and came back to us with a recommendation related to how they think that should be done differently. The one thing I really took out of that report that has been beneficial for us is they said, you're just going to have to go find individuals one by one. You're never going to be able to put out a perfect job posting or have a perfect process that you're going to have an entirely large, diverse pool of candidates. You actually have to go out and find them, which goes into our cadet recruitment. Our SROs are literally teaching classes in our high schools around law enforcement to gauge if there's any interest within those classes. From there, they connect with family members to talk with the family about our cadet program, which pays for their entire tuition to become licensed as a police officer. And we've actually been very successful. We have a cadet class of 5 individuals right now that are very diverse that we'll be promoting to police officer here in January due to fill some vacancies that we have. I believe, at least within Hennepin County, I think we're the only department in Hennepin County that has a title of a community engagement officer. That's all that particular sworn officer does, is works on community engagement. His name is Matt Raby. He also helps with all the work that we do with recreation and parks around engagement with youth. That is his job. I could go into a lot of details that we went into with the Human Rights Commission around some of the activities that we've done related to community engagement, barbershop visits, Yates in the Drive last summer, Stay Safe Place, lots of different activities that we've done through that particular position. And then I can't go without speaking to our work with recreation and parks around Zanewood and some other things. We kind of partnered at the hip in dealing with our youth here in the city of Brooklyn Park, trying to get positive relationships between the youth and their police department. That, along with how HP was being managed last year, that was the start of the outreach team. We are the only suburb I'm aware of that is doing that kind of work. In fact, the only other city that I know is even doing that work is the city of Minneapolis. That's actually where we poached several of our outreach team members, was from that work that was being done in the city of Minneapolis. Several years ago, we started cohorts under the Cities United banner. We were identifying anywhere between 10 to 15 at-risk youth that were identified either through Zanewood or through our SROs that we then brought in and used and built relationships with them. Antonio Smith did a lot of the curriculum around that. That's since been recognized through Hennepin County, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about some opportunities there for us very shortly. I know that we are the only police agency in the entire state that puts a muzzle on our canines if we're out attempting to track someone for a non-violent crime against person. We did that in relation to an incident that we had here probably 3 years ago, something like that. It has not affected our success, which is what I was being told. That has not been the case in looking at the statistics from the last year. Open data. Outside of Minneapolis and St. Paul, we're the only community that has our traffic stop data published by race and by gender. We also put out our entire policy manual probably a year and a half, 2 years ago. Mental health, as you know, we started that this year. It's still a work in progress because of COVID and some other things, but one of the exciting things that did come out of it is the concept of restorative court. We can have individuals that were arrested for petty crimes, basically misdemeanors, and we can put them through a restorative court process down at Brookdale Court. That's a snapshot of our diversity. As you can see, in our sworn ranks, we've more than doubled. That's within 10 years. Within the last 5, we went up roughly 6%. Department-wide, we've nearly doubled in the last 10 years. Within the last 5, we've gone up about 4%. I can share with you that it's difficult in the sworn ranks because of the profession that we have. We don't have a lot of turnover. Most of our turnover is simply due to retirements, and our large bubble of retirements was about 2008 through 2011. Now we're having very sporadic, maybe 1 or 2 a year. That's usually our main opportunity to diversify the police department. Kind of where we've been and where we're at, I don't need to walk through this with you. You were all there. This has been in response to the George Floyd death. Some mandated changes you'd like to know about. These came from the legislature. Quite honestly, there's so many of them, I couldn't even read through a vast majority of them. They made a lot of changes and a lot of different dates that I got to keep track of. But some of the ones to highlight for you, they're going to create a specialized unit through the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension that will do nothing but investigate officer-involved critical incidents. They'll have special training. They're all going to be BCA agents. And if there's an officer-involved critical incident or an officer-involved shooting in the state of Minnesota, that unit will investigate it. They did allow for residency incentives. Cities and counties can offer incentives for their police officers to reside in that community. Limitations on restraints, meaning neck restraints and also positioning someone's hands and legs behind them and placing them into a squad car on their stomach in the back of a squad car. It creates something they call positional asphyxia. Warrior training is prohibited. They added 2 more community members to the post board. Duty to intercede in reporting. The duty to intercede is in their use of force policy that an officer must intervene if they see another officer using excessive force. They also have to report that incident to the chief of police within 24 hours of that occurring. They put in a lot of training related to crisis response, conflict management, and diversity, as well as autism. I chose not to put all the details in here for you, but they mandated a lot of training around that. The arbitration selection procedure, I believe they fell a little short, but they did come up with a new process that there will be 6 arbitrators in the state that will only hear law enforcement cases. And then use of force model policy they have crafted. We've gone back with some questions to them from the Chiefs Association that need to be addressed. And then I found out this morning I was selected to work on the Post Board Advisory Council on rules to overhaul. There were 20 of us throughout the state, with me being one of them, that was selected to be an advisory council to our licensing board on challenges and changes they want to make to the regulations that mandate our licensing. Where we're currently at, we've spent a lot of hours with the Human Rights Commission, giving them the information that they need to do their work. I don't know how many hours, but we've spent several with them, providing them with information. I currently have a message into our city prosecutor to take a look at the court fees that occur down at Brookdale Court. If there's opportunities to make some adjustments there around the idea of racial and social justice. We have a Lights On program we've been doing for years, which is a voucher that we hand out on traffic stop if it's for an equipment violation. Several communities have begun doing that as well. They can take their car to Bobby and Steve's, present the voucher, and the equipment violation gets fixed. I talked about the advisory council. And then so we had a homicide here a couple Sundays ago, and the response from the community was not positive towards law enforcement. We did enlist the help of a faith leader that happens to reside in the city of Brooklyn Park. We're actually having a conversation with several individuals to try to put together potentially a community response team of community members, faith members that can come out to these scenes and hopefully help us investigate the scene, because we're basically viewed as the enemy as soon as we show up. Where we're going to go, I know there's been a lot of conversation around mental health and some other things. So going into 2021, we're clearly going to explore some partnership on social issues. The city manager and I have identified a National Institute for Criminal Justice Reform that does that kind of work that you have talked about related to, like an audit or consulting or that kind of thing. They seem to be a good group for that. I reached out to them last week and have not heard back from them yet. They've done a lot of this kind of work in Washington, D.C., Oakland, and some other cities. So I don't know if they would do a city of 80,000 or not. I'm waiting to hear. Lastly, I would welcome an audit related to how our police department is doing in relation to President Obama's 21st century policing. I've looked at that. I looked at it 5 years ago. I've looked at it again recently, and I would welcome an audit of our work related to comparing us to the 21st century policing model. Another matter that we should talk about aside from police reform, and this is not meant to be a distraction away from police reform, but it's an issue that you need to know about that's happening in this community. Since June 1st of this year, we've had 39 incidents of confirmed shots fired, which means that's not somebody calling in that they thought they heard gunshots down the street. That is how we get some of these calls. But 39 incidents where police officers discovered evidence of shots being fired, whether that's casings in the street, damage to property, damage to a house, something like that. Out of those 39 incidents, 18 people have been shot, 2 of them fatally, and this is since June 1st. If I did have numbers last week. I thought we were going to discuss the violence, but I forgot to bring them with tonight. If you look at the numbers in Minneapolis, you would be startled at what the numbers in Minneapolis look like right now. Within a 3 to 4 month period of time, they've exceeded all of their shots fired and all of their homicides from 2019 in 4 months, right? And I think this community is beginning to see that's beginning to spill over into Brooklyn Park. This is a list of where all the shots fired occurred. I'm obviously not going to go through this list, but it's extremely random. You know, when we did that work at 63rd and Zane, that was policing because we knew who we were dealing with, and they were occupying certain areas at certain times. So we could come up with a game plan to address that. This is a lot more complex because it's occurring all over. The individuals involved in the shootings and the individuals getting shot are not necessarily from Brooklyn Park. They're from all over the metro area. That's just a comparison of shots fired, for the last 5 years from January through August. As you can see, it's not a very attractive trend that's occurring right now. People in the community are feeling unsafe. Normally we have about 665 gun permits that we issue in a year. That's been the 5-year average. We've had 1,120 through the end of August, just in the city of Brooklyn Park. I can share with you that the level of violence in Brooklyn Park is different than our neighbors. But our neighbors are seeing very similar behavior. This absolute lawlessness, this absolute disdain for the police, and no fear of accountability whatsoever. We've been having a lot of conversations at the Hennepin County Chiefs Police Association that outside of Minneapolis, and we've communicated this to them, we're thinking of coming together as the entire Hennepin Chiefs of Police Association and having some kind of press conference to talk to all of our communities about this. Because literally we need the community's help on this, and we're getting none, which I'll get to here in a second. What are our short-term plans as a police department to try to address these issues? The best I can tell you right now is we're working on intelligence. We're working with our partners. We're working with Minneapolis to try to get as much intelligence as we can so we can prevent these incidents from happening. I can tell you that it's tough. We're getting zero cooperation at these crime scenes. None. Nobody will talk to us. Not only are we getting zero cooperation, they're actually damaging the integrity of the crime scene. When we had the incident a couple Sundays ago down at Park Haven, they were literally just tearing down police tape. Right? And we were outnumbered. We ended up calling in the state patrol, and luckily every one of our neighbors sent 2 or 3 cops. We were there for 6 hours trying to gather the evidence related to that incident. Long term, I really do believe it's going to be going to core issues, those core issues around the Cities United. When you talk to people at Cities United, the reason I have always enjoyed going to those seminars and such is they acknowledge that the police are at the bottom of all these social issues. And until we address some of the social issues, the police are going to continue to be at the bottom and dealing with these. We've also had some discussions within the leadership team of some possible investments along the corridor, along the Zane corridor going south from 85th, because as you look at the map, kind of jumps out at you where some attention needs to be drawn. So we're having those discussions internally around potential options there.